I cut through the water like a knife, the manta responding to my every movement as I banked through the densest plankton bloom I'd ever witnessed. The suit's wings extended from my arms, powered by the compact propulsion system on my back. With each flex of my body, the biomimetic design allowed me to swim as effortlessly as the creature it was modeled after. "Readings are off the charts," I said into my comm, watching the holographic display projected inside my visor. Numbers scrolled past my eyes: nutrient density, microscopic biodiversity, temperature gradients. "We're talking levels I've never seen documented anywhere." Marilyn's voice came through clearly in my earpiece. "Sensors are working at 98% efficiency, Miles. Data transmission is stable." I twisted my body to navigate through a particularly thick cloud of bioluminescent plankton, their blue glow illuminating the water around me. My suit's external lights were almost unnecessary with the natural light show surrounding me. Even after 12 years of marine research, I'd never seen anything like this. "Are you getting these visuals?" I asked, knowing the cameras built into my helmet were feeding everything back to the research vessel floating a kilometer above us. "Crystal clear," Marilyn confirmed. "The spectral analysis is showing unusual protein structures in the microorganisms. Dr. Gilbert is already comparing them against known databases." I dove deeper, riding the natural current that pulled me through the heart of the bloom. The manta's wing design made it incredibly energy efficient. Another 6 hours of dive time remained before I'd need to recharge the hydrogen fuel cells. "Miles, you're approaching the depth limit we agreed on," Vicky's voice cut in, my sister's tone shifting from research director to concerned sibling. "Remember, the pressure tests showed inconsistencies past 700 meters. I checked my depth gauge. 658 meters. "Just a little deeper," I replied, adjusting the mixture in my rebreather system. "The bloom's core seems to be centered around 720. I need to get samples from the densest concentration. The manta hasn't been tested beyond 700 in actual field conditions," Vicky insisted. I could picture her standing over the monitoring station on the ship, arms crossed, giving the technicians her signature look of disapproval. "That's why this is called a field test, Vic," I said, unable to keep the excitement from my voice as new readings flashed across my display. Oxygen saturation levels are nearly triple what they should be at this depth. If Jimmy's theory about deep-sea upwelling zones is correct, we're looking at a completely novel ecosystem. The water around me thickened with life. Not just plankton now, but small crustaceans and finger-length fish darting through the bloom, feeding on the microscopic buffet. My suit's external temperature sensors registered an anomalous warm current, 2 degrees above the surrounding water. "I'm sending you a sample now," I said, pressing a control on my wrist panel that activated one of the collection modules built into the manta's chest plate. Water rushed into the sterile container, trapped with whatever microscopic life it contained. "Received. Processing," Marilyn confirmed. I banked right, following the warm current. The movement of water felt strange here, different from typical ocean currents I'd navigated thousands of times before. More directional, almost intentional. "Miles, I'm picking up unusual water displacement patterns approximately 200 meters ahead of your position." John's voice joined the conversation, his sonar specialist's trained ear evident in his precision. "Large-scale movement, not matching known current profiles for this region." I flexed my arms, the wings of the manta spreading wider to give me better maneuverability. "Probably whales," I replied, pushing deeper still. "This much plankton would attract filter feeders. Maybe humpbacks or blues migrated here early." "Pattern isn't consistent with cetacean movement," John countered. "The displacement is, I don't know how to describe it, organized, circular." "Sending you the visuals now," I said, increasing my speed. The thought of documenting whale feeding patterns in this unprecedented bloom sent a rush of scientific adrenaline through me. If we can correlate whale feeding behaviors with these nutrient concentrations. The water suddenly shifted around me. One moment I was swimming forward under my own power. The next I was caught in something that felt like an underwater tornado. The manta's wings strained against the force as I was pulled sideways. "What the hell?" I gasped, fighting to stabilize. "Miles, your velocity just jumped to 30 knots, Vicky shouted through the comm. "What's happening?" I tried to fold the wings back to streamline the suit, but the current was too powerful. My body spun once, twice, before I managed to right myself. The plankton swirled around me in a massive circular pattern, like I was caught in a whirlpool. "I'm caught in some kind of current," I reported, trying to keep my voice steady as I diverted power to the thrusters. The manta hummed against my back, fighting the pull but barely slowing my movement. "It's dragging me east-northeast." "Get out of there," Vicky ordered. "Full power to vertical thrusters." I did as she said, but the upward momentum barely counteracted the lateral pull. Whatever had me in its grip was far stronger than the manta's engines. "John, what am I dealing with here?" I asked, my eyes scanning the water ahead for any clue. His voice came back tense. "The displacement pattern. It's like nothing I've ever seen. It's creating a funnel effect about 200 meters in diameter." The swirling plankton thinned enough for me to see ahead, and what I saw made my blood run cold. The water seemed to disappear into a massive dark opening about 50 meters ahead. Not a cave or underwater formation. This was moving, pulsing. "Oh my God," I whispered. "What do you see?" Marilyn's voice sounded small in my ear. "I think it's a mouth," I said, the words sounding insane even as I spoke them. "An enormous mouth." As I was pulled closer, I could make out more details. The opening was lined with structures that looked horribly like teeth, not the sharp triangles of a shark, but long, comb-like projections designed for filtering water, like baleen in whales, but on an impossible scale. "Miles, get out of there now," Vicky screamed in my ear. "Full emergency ascent." I redirected all power to the thrusters, feeling the manta strain against my back. For a moment, I thought I might break free. The pull lessened slightly, my speed dropping. But then the current shifted, strengthened, and I was yanked forward with a force that nearly tore the wings from my arms. "I can't break free," I shouted, genuine fear cutting through my scientific fascination. "The pull is too strong." I was close enough now to see inside the maw. It wasn't dark in there. Bioluminescent patches lined what I could only call a throat, casting an eerie blue glow over everything. The scale was incomprehensible. This wasn't a whale or any known creature. This was something else. "Miles," Vicky's voice cracked with panic. "Your tracker shows you moving at 45 knots. The teeth were right in front of me now, massive, pale structures rising like stalactites and stalagmites around the circular opening. I tucked my body into a ball, making myself as small as possible as I shot between them. "I'm inside," I reported, my voice strangely calm despite the chaos. "I've been ingested by the organism." My world tumbled as the current carried me deeper. I activated the manta's brightest lights, illuminating my surroundings in harsh white. The walls around me pulsed pink and purple, lined with what appeared to be cilia-like structures that waved in rhythmic patterns. I was in a massive tunnel of living tissue. "Pressure stable. Oxygen levels in my suit nominal," I said, falling back on training, reporting vital statistics while my mind struggled to process what I was seeing. "Temperature rising. 39 degrees Celsius and climbing." "Miles, what are you seeing?" Marilyn asked. her scientific curiosity momentarily overriding the emergency. I spun slowly in the fluid that carried me, taking in the impossible environment. I'm in some sort of internal cavity. The walls they're alive, pulsating, fleshy, pink and purple tissue with structures that look like oversized cilia. They're moving in waves, probably to help transport water and food through the system. The comms crackled with voices talking over each other, Vicky giving orders to the ship's crew. John reporting my position had stopped displaying normally on their systems. Marilyn asking about my oxygen reserves. I barely heard them. The enormity of my situation was finally hitting me. I wasn't caught in a current. I wasn't inside a cave. I was inside a living creature of such massive proportions that it defied everything we understood about marine biology. "It's not possible," I whispered more to myself than to my team. "No marine organism could possibly grow this large without us knowing about it. The energy requirements alone would..." I trailed off as the tunnel I was in opened into a larger chamber. My lights couldn't reach the walls on either side. The space was vast, cathedral-like in its dimensions. More of the bioluminescent patches covered the ceiling in patterns that reminded me of constellations. "I think I know why we've never detected it," I said, my scientific mind still working despite the danger. "It must spend most of its time in the deep ocean trenches. This is the first time it's come up to feed on a surface bloom." "Miles, focus." Vicky's voice cut through my scientific speculation. "We need to get you out of there." But as the reality of my situation sank in, I knew there was no quick escape. The walls contracted around me, pushing me deeper into the creature's digestive system. The fleshy tunnel squeezed and relaxed in peristaltic waves. My suit sensors registered increasing heat and changing chemical composition in the surrounding fluid. "I'm trapped inside a living marine megafauna," I said, the words feeling surreal as they left my mouth. "And it's unlike anything we've ever documented before." My manta suit tumbled in the flow, spinning me disorienting circles. I pulled hard against the controls, trying to right myself. "I'm getting tossed around in here," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady, having trouble stabilizing. The suit's wings caught against the fleshy walls, then snapped back as another contraction hit. I managed to engage the auxiliary thrusters, giving me just enough control to stop the spinning. "Miles, we're tracking your position." John's voice came through my comms. "Based on water displacement and cavity measurements, we estimate you're inside an organism approximately 30 meters in length." I blinked sweat from my eyes. 30 meters? That can't be right. Nothing that size should exist undetected in these waters. "Dr. Gilbert wants to speak with you," Marilyn cut in. Crystal's excited voice filled my helmet. "Miles, this is extraordinary. The measurements, combined with the feeding behavior John mapped, suggest you might be inside a lead ichthys." "A what?" I asked, bracing as another muscle contraction slammed me against a ridged wall. The impact made me grunt in pain. "Are you okay?" Vicky asked, her voice tight with concern. "Just bouncing off the walls," I said, regaining control of the manta. "Crystal, what were you saying?" "Lead ichthys problematicus," Crystal continued, unable to hide her excitement despite the situation. "A prehistoric filter-feeding fish from the Jurassic period. They grew up to 30 meters long. Some estimates suggest even larger. They've been extinct for over 150 million years." "Well, this one didn't get the memo," I muttered as another contraction pushed me along. The walls around me had changed texture, less rough, more muscular, lined with ridges that caught at my suit as I passed. The narrow passage was getting smaller, the contractions more coordinated. I was definitely in the esophagus now. "Running structural integrity check," I reported, tapping commands on my wrist panel. Numbers scrolled across my display. "Hull pressure increasing. We're at 83% integrity, still holding, but the contractions are getting stronger. Can you turn around? Vicky asked. I tried engaging the main thrusters, pushing against the flow of water and muscle. The manta strained, wings extended to their maximum. For a moment, I thought I was making progress, but then another powerful contraction hit, pushing me back farther than I'd advanced. Negative, I said, shutting down the thrusters to conserve power. The muscular action is too strong. It's like swimming up a waterfall. I'm going to save energy and try to navigate whatever's ahead. The passage widened slightly, giving me room to orient the suit properly. The walls pulsed with bioluminescent patches, providing enough light to see by. My sensors detected increasing acidity in the surrounding fluid, still mild, but trending upward. Picking up a structural change ahead, I reported, studying the readout. Looks like some kind of junction or branch in the passage. John's voice came through with a burst of static. We're having trouble maintaining signal clarity. You're approximately 20 meters inside the organism now. The signal degradation makes sense, I said. All this tissue must be interfering with transmission. I'm seeing a split in the passage ahead. The water flow is dividing. I managed to stabilize the manta enough to take readings. The passage ahead branched in two directions. A larger opening continuing downward, and several smaller channels branching off to the sides. I think I'm approaching a junction between the gill chambers and the stomach, I said, putting together what I knew of fish anatomy. Water is flowing both ways. Miles, Sarah's voice broke through the static. You need to be careful about which path you take. Our models suggest the gill path could crush your suit with specialized filtration structures, gill rakers, and the stomach path would expose you to digestive acids that will compromise your hull integrity. I checked my options. The manta was equipped with external manipulator arms for collecting samples and basic defense mechanisms, a high-pressure water jet and electrical discharge system designed to deter aggressive marine life. None of that seemed helpful against the inner workings of a creature this massive. My standard tools aren't going to help much here, I said. The manipulator arms can't grip anything useful, and I don't think shocking this thing from the inside is a great idea. Might just make it contract harder. The junction was approaching rapidly. I had maybe a minute to decide which way to go, or more accurately, which way to try to direct myself, as the creature seemed determined to make the choice for me. Wait, Miles. Marilyn's voice cut through. Dr. Gilbert has information that might help. I'm listening, I said, bracing against another contraction. These filter feeders have very sensitive gill structures, Crystal explained, her words coming through in broken patches. They're designed to expel foreign objects, irritants. You're breaking up, I said, adjusting my comm settings. Say again? Marilyn's voice came through clearer. Dr. Gilbert says the gill structures are designed to expel foreign objects. They're sensitive to irritants. If you can stimulate them, they might push you out naturally. My mind raced. If I could reach the gill chambers and trigger an expulsion response, I might have a chance. These fish evolved to filter tiny organisms from the water, not deal with large foreign bodies in their respiratory system. I think I see what you're getting at, I replied, a plan forming. The manta's electrical discharge system might irritate the gill tissue enough to trigger a defensive response. I'd need to get into the gill chamber, but not so far that I get trapped in the gill rakers. Another massive contraction hit, pushing me hard toward the junction. I had seconds to decide. I'm going to try for the gill pathway, I announced. If Crystal is right about this being a lead zichthys, its respiratory system should be my best chance. Be careful, Miles, Vicky said, her professional tone slipping just enough to reveal her worry. I engaged the thrusters, angling toward the side channels where water flowed toward what I hoped were the gill chambers. The suit scraped along the fleshy wall as I fought against the main current, trying to pull me toward the stomach. "Heading for the gills," I said, pushing the manta to its limits. "Let's see if we can convince this living fossil to spit me out." "I'm redirecting power to the front thrusters," I said, tapping commands into the control pad on my forearm. "The gill passage is narrowing." Water rushed past me toward what I hoped were the gill chambers, but the flow was getting stronger. My suit struggled against it, the motors whining with effort. I needed to think fast. "Miles, your vital signs are elevating," Vicky's voice came through with a hint of concern. "Try to keep calm. What are you seeing?" I squinted through the manta's forward viewport. The translucent tissue walls pulsed with an eerie bioluminescence, casting everything in a pale blue glow. "I can see some kind of structural change ahead," I reported. "The passage is narrowing into what looks like a series of—" I broke off, the realization hitting me. "Gill rakers. I can see the gill rakers." The massive comb-like structures loomed ahead, moving rhythmically as water flowed through them. Each one was at least 2 meters long, bristling with countless filaments designed to trap plankton while allowing water to pass. But the manta wasn't plankton, and those structures would crush my vessel like it was nothing. "Miles, you need to get out of there now," John urged. "Those structures aren't designed to let anything your size pass through." "I know," I said, my mind racing. "But I can't turn around against this current." I checked the depth gauge and oxygen levels. Both were stable, but that wouldn't matter if I ended up crushed between prehistoric gill rakers. I had maybe 30 seconds before the current carried me straight into them. "I need to trigger a defensive response," I said, fingers flying across the control interface. "Something to make this fish spit me out." "What are you thinking?" Marilyn asked. "The acoustic array," I answered, already pulling up the system controls. "It's designed for communication and sonar mapping, but I can reconfigure it to emit high-frequency pulses." "You want to give a prehistoric fish a headache?" Crystal's voice carried a mix of disbelief and admiration. "More than a headache," I said. "Most large marine organisms have defensive responses to certain sound frequencies. If I can mimic the right ones." I worked frantically, bypassing safety protocols and reconfiguring the manta's external acoustic transducers. The gill rakers were getting closer, the water current strengthening as it funneled between them. 20 seconds, I muttered, more to myself than the team. "Miles, your oxygen recycler needs power priority," Vicky warned. "Whatever you're doing." "I know what I'm doing," I cut in, then added, "I hope." I diverted power from all non-essential systems to the acoustic array. The interior lights dimmed immediately, plunging the cockpit into near darkness. Only the blue glow of the control panels and the bioluminescence from outside provided any visibility now. "Hull integrity at 82%, Marilyn reported. "Whatever you're planning, do it fast." My fingers danced over the controls, programming a specific frequency pattern. I drew on everything I knew about marine biology, combining the low-frequency distress calls of injured whales with the hunting vocalizations of orcas, predator and prey signals that might trigger an instinctive response. "Acoustic array configured," I announced. "Emitting now." I hit the activation command. The manta shuddered violently as it emitted the deafening, modulated shriek. Even inside the cockpit with its soundproofing, the noise was almost unbearable. A rising and falling wail that mimicked both wounded prey and approaching predator. The effect was immediate. The muscular walls around me convulsed, spasming wildly. I was thrown against my restraints as the manta pitched sideways. "It's working!" I shouted over the noise. "The water flow, it's reversing!" The entire passage contracted, then expanded dramatically. I felt it more than saw it. The pressure changes as the creature's powerful throat muscles convulsed in what I recognized as a massive gag reflex. This living fossil was trying to expel whatever was causing it distress. "Hold on," John said. "We're getting erratic movement readings from your position." "That's because I'm being thrown around like—" Another violent contraction cut me off, slamming me against the side of the cockpit. The manta lurched backward through the contracting passageway, tossed like a toy in a washing machine. Warning lights flashed across the control panels as the external sensors failed under pressure. Hull integrity dropping to 63%. Marilyn's voice crackled through the comm system, breaking up with static. "External cameras offline," I reported, trying to keep my voice steady as the manta spun through the churning water. "Navigation systems compromised." I grabbed the manual controls, trying to stabilize the vessel, but another spasm sent me tumbling again. The creature's muscles were contracting with incredible force, pushing the manta back the way I had come. "It's working!" I shouted over the alarms. The sound pattern triggered a defensive response. "We can barely hear you, Miles," Vicky replied, her voice fragmented by interference. "Your signal is breaking up." "I said it's working," I repeated louder. "The creature is expelling me. The acoustic—" A massive contraction cut me off, sending the manta into another spin. I fought down a wave of nausea as the vessel whirled through the water. "Team, if you can hear me, I'm being forced back toward the mouth," I said, doubting the clarity of my transmission, but needing to try. "The gastrointestinal muscles are contracting in sequence. It's a textbook regurgitation response." The pressure increased suddenly, squeezing the manta from all sides. The hull groaned under the strain, more warning lights flashing across the panels. I braced myself, gripping the controls tightly. Then, with one final powerful contraction, I felt a rush of movement. The pressure vanished suddenly as the creature's enormous mouth opened, ejecting the manta into open water. The sudden release of pressure sent me hurtling forward like a champagne cork. Sunlight filtered through the viewport. Actual sunlight, not bioluminescence. The control panels flickered, struggling to adjust to the sudden change in environment. I was out. I had escaped from the belly of a living, prehistoric monster. Come on," I muttered, wrestling with the controls. The suit's propulsion system whined in protest as I redirected power to the stabilizers. With a series of jerky movements, I managed to stop the spinning and right myself in the water column. My hands trembled slightly as I wiped a layer of sweat from my forehead. "Miles? Miles, do you copy?" Vicky's voice came through the comm system, broken and staticky but audible. "I'm here," I said, my voice shakier than I'd expected. "I'm out. The manta's covered in mucus and spinning like crazy, but I've got control now." A chorus of relieved voices erupted through my headset, everyone talking at once. I could make out Marilyn asking about system status, John wanting coordinates, and Crystal saying something about unprecedented documentation. "Everyone, quiet," Vicky commanded, her voice cutting through the chatter. "Miles, what's your status?" I ran a quick diagnostic, watching the readouts flicker across my display. Hull integrity at 76%. Oxygen recyclers functioning at normal capacity. Main propulsion operating at 83%. As the manta stabilized, I turned to look behind me. Through the mucus-streaked viewport, I saw it. The creature that had swallowed me whole and then spat me back out. The lead's ichthys was massive, easily 90 feet long, with a mouth that could have swallowed a small car. Its enormous body undulated slowly through the water, silver-gray scales catching the filtered sunlight. The creature's wide, flat head tapered to a powerful tail that swept lazily back and forth, propelling it effortlessly through the water. "I can see it," I said, my scientific curiosity overwhelming any residual fear. It's incredible. Exactly as the fossil record suggested, but alive." The giant fish seemed unbothered by our encounter, already resuming its feeding in the plankton bloom. Its enormous mouth opened wide, taking in vast quantities of water and the microscopic organisms within it. Gill rakers, the same structures I'd nearly been trapped in, filtered out the food as water passed through its massive gills. "Miles, I'm showing damage to your external sensor array and communications antenna," John reported. "Signal strength is fluctuating." I swiped at the viewport with the manta's exterior cleaning mechanism, clearing some of the mucus to improve visibility. "Confirmed. I'm getting intermittent readings from the external sensors. Communication is breaking up but functional." "What's the creature doing now?" Crystal asked, her scientific excitement evident even through the static. "Feeding again, about 30 meters away from me. It's completely unbothered by what just happened. I must have been nothing more than an annoying piece of debris in its filtration system." "Miles," Sarah's voice cut in, authoritative and firm. "You need to return to the surface immediately. The manta has sustained significant damage, and we need to assess it before it compromises your safety." She was right, of course. The smart move would be to head straight up. The manta had survived being swallowed by a prehistoric fish, but it wasn't designed for that kind of stress. The oxygen systems were stable for now, but that could change if more systems failed. I pointed the manta upward, engaging the ascent thrusters, but as I began to rise, I caught sight of the Leadsichthys silhouetted against the glowing plankton bloom. The scene was breathtaking. A living fossil, thought extinct for over 150 million years, feeding in a massive bioluminescent cloud. "Wait," I said, bringing the manta to a hover. "I need to document this." "Miles, did you not hear me?" Sarah's voice crackled through the comm. "Return to the surface now." "Just give me 2 minutes," I said, already checking the status of the manta's camera systems. The main exterior cameras are damaged, but the auxiliary imaging system is still online. I can't leave without proper documentation. No one would believe this without evidence. "Your suit's internal recordings have captured everything," Vicky reminded me. "Low resolution and obscured by mucus," I countered. "The auxiliary cameras can give us clean, high-definition footage if I position correctly." I didn't wait for permission. This was potentially the scientific discovery of the century, and I wasn't going to lose the chance to document it properly. I redirected the manta, moving to a better vantage point about 20 meters from the massive fish. The manta responded well to my commands despite the damage, the wings extending from my arms, allowing precise movements through the water. I activated the remaining functional cameras, adjusting their settings for the low light conditions and distance. "Beginning documentation," I reported. "Subject is approximately 90 feet in length, with a mouth span of roughly 15 feet. Body structure matches fossil records of Leadsichthys problematicus with remarkable fidelity." I spoke clearly for the recording as I maneuvered the manta in a wide arc around the creature, careful to maintain a safe distance. No visible evolutionary adaptations or differences from known fossil specimens. This suggests an extraordinary case of evolutionary stasis spanning over 150 million years. The creature continued feeding, unaware or unconcerned with my presence. Its massive tail swept through the water with slow, powerful movements, creating currents that I could feel, even at this distance. "Are you getting this data?" I asked the team. "Partial transmission coming through," Marilyn confirmed. "Enough to verify what we're seeing, but we'll need the complete datasets when you return." What about the plankton bloom? Crystal asked. Can you get readings on its composition? I checked the environmental sensors. Some of them are still functional. I'm getting basic readings on the bloom density and composition. The nutrient levels are off the charts. Might explain how something this size can sustain itself. As I worked, carefully documenting every aspect of the creature I could observe, I began checking through the data that had survived my ordeal inside the lead Zichthys. Most of the external sensor readings from before I was swallowed were intact, including detailed scans of the plankton bloom. This changes everything, I said, thinking out loud as much as communicating with my team. Finding a living specimen of lead Zichthys problematicus challenges our entire understanding of deep-sea ecosystems. And extinction events, John added through the staticky comm. If this species survived the end Jurassic extinction event, what else might have? Exactly, I agreed, still recording footage as I spoke. We've always assumed that the deep ocean trenches remained relatively stable environments over geological time, but this is direct evidence of a species remaining virtually unchanged for millions of years. The implications for evolutionary biology are enormous, Crystal chimed in. This represents an extraordinary case of evolutionary stasis. The selective pressures must have remained incredibly consistent to prevent significant adaptation over such a vast time span. I continued to circle the creature, making sure to capture footage from multiple angles. The biggest question is whether this is a single specimen or if there's a breeding population. If it's just one individual, it could be extraordinarily long-lived. If there's a population, they must have remained incredibly isolated to avoid detection until now. The deep scattering layer might explain how they've remained hidden, Vicky suggested. If they primarily feed on these dense plankton blooms within the DSL, our sonar technology would have difficulty distinguishing them from the surrounding biomass. As I finished capturing the footage, I took a moment to simply observe the creature. Despite everything that had happened, being swallowed, nearly crushed, and violently expelled, I felt an overwhelming sense of privilege. I was witnessing something that no human had ever seen before, a living link to Earth's ancient past. All right, I said finally. I've got everything we need. Beginning ascent now. I pointed the manta upward once more and engaged the thrusters. As I rose through the water column, I took one last look at the lead Zichthys. Its massive form was growing smaller below me, still silhouetted against the glowing plankton bloom, continuing the same feeding behaviors it had performed for millions of years before humans ever existed. The manta moved steadily upward, carrying me back toward the surface and the research vessel waiting above. Despite the damaged sensors and communication array, the suit's core systems were functioning well enough to get me home safely. I monitored the hull integrity readings carefully, watching for any signs that the pressure changes of ascent might worsen the damage. Beginning decompression protocols, I reported as I reached the appropriate depth. The manta's systems should handle it, but we might need to extend the stops to be safe. Understood, Vicky replied. We're tracking your ascent. Just take it slow and steady. As I ascended through the layers of the ocean, my mind raced with questions and possibilities. What other supposedly extinct species might still exist in the deepest parts of our oceans? How had the lead Zichthys remained undetected for so long? What did this mean for our understanding of evolution and extinction? One thing was certain. This discovery would change marine biology forever, and I had the footage to prove it. Light filtered through the murky water above me, growing brighter with each meter of my ascent. The hull integrity warning flashed red on my display panel. 74% now, down 2 points from minutes ago. Not catastrophic, but definitely concerning. Hull integrity dropping, but still within operational parameters, I said, tapping the screen to acknowledge the alert. Ascending at reduced speed. The manta shuddered as I guided it upward. The control response felt sluggish, like steering a car with a flat tire. The slime coating my viewport had started to dissipate, giving me a clearer view of the surrounding water. "Copy that, Miles," Vicky replied, her voice clearer than it had been in the depths. "Maintain current ascent rate. No need to push it." I adjusted my position in the pilot seat, wincing as my back protested. Being tossed around inside the lead ichthys had left me with what would surely become an impressive collection of bruises. "Hey, check this out," I said, noticing something strange about the water around me. There's a clear avoidance pattern in the marine life. About 50 meters out from the lead ichthys in all directions, it's almost completely empty of fish. I directed one of the remaining functional cameras downward, where typically there would be schools of fish taking advantage of the nutrients stirred up by a large feeder. There was instead a conspicuous absence. A perfect sphere of emptiness surrounded the prehistoric creature. "That's fascinating," Crystal's voice came through, excitement evident despite the static. "Are you getting readings on the water composition in that zone?" I checked the environmental sensors. Oxygen levels are actually higher than normal. pH is slightly altered, more acidic. And there's a distinct temperature gradient. It's almost as if the lead ichthys is creating its own microclimate. "The implications are huge," Crystal replied. "If it's secreting some kind of deterrent compound that modern fish recognize and avoid, then maybe it's not the first one they've encountered," I finished her thought. "Which would mean there's a population, not just a single specimen." I tapped commands into the control panel, recording these observations and tagging them with timestamps and depth markers. The scientific significance of what we'd discovered was just starting to sink in. A living fossil, swimming in waters we thought we understood, changing everything we knew about extinction events and evolutionary timelines. "Miles, this is Sarah." Her voice cut through my scientific reverie, sharp and clinical. "I need a full status report on your physical condition. Any dizziness, disorientation, numbness in extremities?" "I'm fine, Sarah. Just some bruising from being knocked around." "Any change in vision? Shortness of breath? Tingling sensations?" I smiled at her persistence. "Negative on all counts. The manta took the beating, not me. We're preparing the recovery equipment now." John's voice joined the conversation. "ETA to surface at your current ascent rate." I checked the depth gauge. "About 22 minutes if I maintain this speed. The damaged exterior is causing significant drag." "Copy that. We'll be ready." As I rose through the water column, the quality of the comlink steadily improved. I could now hear the background noise from the ship. Excited voices, movement, the occasional burst of laughter or exclamation. The team was already poring over the preliminary data I transmitted. "Miles, the footage you captured is remarkable," Crystal said. "The gill structure alone will rewrite textbooks, and the way it processes the plankton bloom, I've never seen anything like it. The feeding efficiency is off the charts," I added, remembering the massive mouth opening to engulf cubic meters of nutrient-rich water. "No wonder it can maintain that size. The energy intake must be enormous." I continued my ascent, using the slower-than-normal pace to mentally catalog everything I'd witnessed. The precise movements of the creature, the internal structure I'd inadvertently mapped during my journey through its digestive tract, the bioluminescent patches that lined its insides. Each observation was another piece of a puzzle we hadn't even known existed until today. "Miles," Vicky's voice came through again. "What's your oxygen situation?" I checked the gauges. Recyclers operating at 83%. I've got enough for the ascent plus another hour if needed. "Good. And the hull integrity? Holding steady at 74%. The pressure decrease as I ascend is helping. The manta jolted suddenly, a shudder running through the frame. Another warning light blinked on. This one yellow rather than red. "What was that?" Vicky asked, tension edging into her voice. "Just hit the thermocline," I replied, referring to the layer where water temperature changes rapidly with depth. The damaged exterior sensors aren't handling the temperature differential well. Compensating now. I manually adjusted the environmental systems, bypassing the automatic controls that were struggling with the sudden change. The warning light continued to blink, but the shuddering stopped. "How's it looking?" Marilyn asked. "Manageable. The suit wasn't designed for rapid temperature transitions with compromised sensors. I'm routing auxiliary power to stabilize the internal environment." The light from above grew stronger as I ascended through the thermocline. Blues deepened into rich aquamarine, then lightened toward the surface. I could make out the silhouette of the horizon above me now, a dark shape against the shimmering ceiling of the ocean. "Visual contact with the horizon," I reported. "Distance approximately 60 meters. "We see you, Miles," John confirmed. "Recovery team is standing by." The ascent continued, slower than I would have liked, but steady. Each meter brought me closer to safety, but also further from the extraordinary creature below. Part of me, the scientist, the explorer, wanted to turn around, to dive back down and continue documenting the Leeds ictus. But the pragmatist in me knew the manta needed repairs before any further exploration. "You know," I said, thinking aloud as I often did during dives, "this discovery challenges everything we thought we knew about the Jurassic extinction boundary. A species this large surviving undetected, it opens up questions about what else might be down there. The deep ocean remains less explored than the surface of Mars," Crystal agreed. "Less than 5% properly documented. And most of that exploration has focused on trenches and thermal vents," I added. "If the Leeds ichthys has been living in the open water column all this time..." I trailed off, the implications too vast to fully articulate. The manta rose steadily, the light from above growing stronger with each passing minute. 30 meters to surface, I reported, hull integrity holding at 73%. The final stage of my ascent brought a profound sense of relief mixed with scientific excitement. The sunlight penetrated the water more directly now, illuminating particles suspended in the blue. The manta's systems were strained but operational, carrying me upward toward the waiting research vessel. I watched the depth gauge count down, 20 meters, 15, 10, and prepared for the transition back to the surface world. I broke the surface with a rush of foam and water cascading down the manta's viewport. Sunlight hit my eyes directly for the first time in hours, momentarily blinding me after the deep blue darkness. The horizon loomed larger than I expected, its research deck already buzzing with activity as crew members pointed in my direction. The comms crackled with renewed clarity now that I was above water. "Visual confirmation on the manta," someone called. "Recovery team, move now." I shut down the main thrusters and let the manta's natural buoyancy keep me afloat. The suit's systems hummed and whined around me, the damage making itself known through unfamiliar rattles and hisses. My muscles ached from being tossed around inside the cockpit. "Miles, stay put. Recovery boat approaching your position," Vicky said through the comms. Her voice carried that familiar mix of professional authority and sisterly concern. The small recovery boat sped toward me, its outboard motor cutting through the gentle swells. 3 crew members in safety gear leaned over the side as they approached, tossing out a capture harness. The yellow float splashed down around the manta. "Holy shit," one of them shouted as they got closer. "What is that stuff all over the hull?" The thick, translucent mucus still coated much of the exterior, giving the manta's sleek black surface a sickly, organic appearance. I couldn't help but smile. The first physical evidence of my encounter, right there for everyone to see. "That's what the inside of a living fossil looks like," I called back, though my voice remained contained in my helmet. I tapped the comms. "Vicky, let the recovery team know I can hear them, but they can't hear me through the hull." The capture process took longer than usual. The mucus made the manta slippery, and twice the harness slid off before they managed to secure it properly. I powered down all remaining systems except life support and waited as they towed me back to the horizon. The sensation of floating on the surface felt strangely serene after the chaos inside the lead Ichthys. Once alongside the research vessel, the main crane swung into position. Metal cables descended, and the recovery team attached them to the manta's lifting points. I felt the familiar jolt as the slack disappeared from the cables, and the manta rose from the water, dripping and gleaming in the sunlight. The crane operator swung me over the deck with practiced precision. As I descended toward the landing pad, I saw the entire research team waiting, Vicky standing front and center, arms crossed, her expression unreadable from this distance. The manta settled onto the deck with a gentle thud. Immediately, crew members swarmed around it, securing it in place. I heard their exclamations of disgust and fascination as they encountered the mucus covering the hull. "Stand back," Vicky ordered. "Let's get him out first. Then we can examine the exterior." The manual release for the cockpit was still functional, thankfully. I twisted the emergency handle, and with a hiss of equalizing pressure, the curved viewport lifted upward. Fresh air rushed in, carrying the familiar scents of salt water, diesel fuel, and the metallic tang of the research vessel. Hands reached in to help me out. I unfastened the internal harness and allowed myself to be half lifted from the cockpit. My legs felt unsteady after hours of being confined in the pilot position. "Easy there," Braden said, his medical officer's training evident in his gentle but firm grip on my arm. "Let's get you to the lab." "I need to see the data first," I protested, though I didn't resist as they led me away from the manta. "Data's not going anywhere," Vicky said, walking alongside us. "You need to get checked out." The ship's lab had been hastily converted to serve medical purposes. Braden guided me to a chair and wrapped a thermal blanket around my shoulders. I hadn't realized I was shivering until the warmth enveloped me. "Your core temperature's a bit low," he said, checking the readings on a handheld monitor after placing sensors on my skin. "Not dangerous, but let's warm you up." The lab door burst open and Sarah rushed in, her face cycling through a series of emotions: relief at seeing me alive, concern at my bedraggled appearance, and finally, naked scientific curiosity that couldn't be contained. "What did it look like from the inside?" she asked, pulling up a stool across from me. Braden shot her a disapproving glance. "Let him rest for a minute." "I'm fine," I insisted, though the thermal blanket felt reassuringly good. The walls were lined with this dense, vascularized tissue, not like a mammal, more fish-like but with structures I've never seen before. The gill chambers were massive, with filtering structures that looked almost mechanical in their precision. As I spoke, more team members filtered into the lab. Crystal, John, and Marilyn joined the growing semicircle around me. Vicky stood by the door, supervising but keeping some distance. "The mucus was everywhere," I continued, warming to my topic despite my physical exhaustion. "But it wasn't random. It seemed to serve specific functions in different parts of the organism. Near the gills, it was thinner, probably to facilitate oxygen exchange. In the main digestive tract, it was thicker, more viscous." "Did it try to digest you?" Marilyn asked, her eyes wide. "Not actively. I think the manta was too large to be recognized as food. It swallowed me because I was in the middle of its feeding path, just collateral intake while it was filtering plankton. Braden interrupted by placing a blood pressure cuff around my arm. Any pain? Dizziness? Nausea? Some bruising from being tossed around? Nothing serious. He nodded, but continued his examination methodically, checking my pupils, testing my reflexes, and monitoring my oxygen saturation. The hull integrity warnings. How bad was it? Vicky asked from her position by the door. Got down to 73%. The pressure in the deeper sections of the digestive tract was significant, I answered. But the main systems held. The external sensors took the worst of it. John stepped forward, tablet in hand. Speaking of which, Marilyn's been downloading what survived from the data systems. You want to see what we got? I sat up straighter, ignoring Braden's quiet sigh. Absolutely. John tapped his tablet, and the lab's main display screen lit up. Give us a second to compile the footage. While we waited, Crystal approached with a sample container. We scraped some of that mucus off the manta. Initial analysis shows proteins unlike anything in our database. Not surprising, I said. We're talking about a species that's supposedly been extinct for over 165 million years. The screen flickered, then filled with the first images from my dive. The footage was jerky at first, showing the plankton bloom from my initial descent, then steadied as it captured my approach to what we now knew was the lead ichthys. There, John said, pausing the video on a frame that showed the massive creature in profile, its mouth open as it moved through the water. That's our first external shot. The team fell silent, taking in the enormity of what they were seeing. The lead ichthys filled the frame, its ancient form both familiar from fossil reconstructions and utterly alien in its living state. The coloration, Crystal murmured. Nothing like what we've theorized. Play the interior footage, I urged. John advanced the timeline, and suddenly we were inside the creature. The footage showed the pulsating walls, the bizarre structures, the play of bioluminescence that lit the interior. Despite the damage to the cameras, several clear segments had survived, documenting my journey through the living fossil. This is Dr. Gilbert, who had joined us quietly, stepped forward to examine the footage more closely. This is unmistakably Leadsichthys problematicus, the gill structure, the feeding apparatus. It matches the fossil record precisely, but with soft tissue features we could only guess at before. How is this possible? Marilyn asked. How does a species stay hidden for 165 million years? Deep ocean refugia, I suggested. Isolated populations adapting to changing conditions over time, but maintaining their basic form because their ecological niche remained stable. The footage continued, showing my struggle through the gill chambers and the moment when I activated the acoustic array. The screen showed static briefly, then cut to external footage again as I was expelled from the creature. Tell us about the acoustic deterrent, Vicky said. That was quick thinking. I explained my reasoning, how I'd reconfigured the manta's acoustic array to produce high-frequency pulses that would irritate the sensitive gill tissues. I knew from our research on modern filter feeders that they have specialized sensory cells to detect foreign objects. I gambled that the lead ichthys would have similar defensive mechanisms, even if more primitive. And it worked, John said, sounding impressed despite himself. It worked too well, actually. The force of the expulsion is what caused most of the damage to the manta. While we talked, Marilyn had been working at a side terminal, downloading and sorting the surviving data from the manta's systems. We've got environmental readings, structural analysis, and some partial biometric data on the creature, she reported. John pulled up another screen. You should see this, he said, bringing up a sonar image captured from the Horizon systems. This is what we were tracking while you were inside. The image showed a massive outline moving slowly through the water column. A tiny blip, the manta, appeared as a dot inside the larger form, then was suddenly expelled. Based on these readings, John continued, we're looking at a specimen approximately 28 meters in length, possibly larger. I leaned forward, studying the images. The fossil record suggests they could grow up to 30 meters. This could be a mature adult. Or it could be a juvenile, Crystal suggested, excitement creeping into her voice. There could be an entire population down there. The implications of that possibility sent a wave of excited murmurs through the team. If this wasn't a single surviving specimen but part of a thriving population of Leedsichthys, it would rewrite our understanding of marine evolutionary history. We need to go back, I said, the words coming out before I'd fully formulated the thought. With proper equipment, better sensors, maybe a submersible drone that could follow it without being perceived as food. Sarah, who had been unusually quiet, finally spoke up. Miles, look at the manta. She gestured toward the door, though we couldn't see the deck from the lab. It's badly damaged. You nearly didn't make it back. This creature, as scientifically important as it is, represents a significant danger. The danger came from being unprepared, I countered. Now we know what we're dealing with. We can design the right approach, the right equipment. And what if there are other unknown megafauna down there? Sarah pressed. Other species we're not prepared for? That's exactly why we need to return, I insisted. Think about the scientific implications. If the Leedsichthys survived, what else might be down there? We could be on the verge of discovering an entire ecosystem of living fossils. Vicky stepped into the center of the group. This isn't a decision we're making right now. Miles needs rest, and we need time to analyze the data we already have. But I started to protest. No arguments, she said firmly. Medical officer's orders, right, Braden? Braden nodded. At least 12 hours of rest before we discuss next steps. I wanted to argue further, but exhaustion was catching up with me. The adrenaline that had carried me through the ordeal was fading, leaving my body heavy and my thoughts less sharp than I needed them to be for this debate. Fine, I conceded. But the data analysis continues. I want preliminary reports ready when I wake up. As the team dispersed to their various tasks, I remained seated, the thermal blanket still wrapped around my shoulders. The monitor still displayed the sonar image of the Leedsichthys, its massive form a shadow against the blue background. A living fossil, swimming in waters we thought we understood. The greatest scientific discovery of my career, perhaps of the century. I didn't sleep that night. Couldn't. My mind buzzed with all we'd discovered. The shower had washed away the mucus and salt water, but nothing could rinse the images from my head. That massive mouth, the living walls of tissue, the impossible reality of a creature that shouldn't exist. 12 hours of rest, Braden had ordered. I gave it 2 before slipping out of my cabin. The lab was empty at 2 a.m. Perfect. I turned on just enough lights to work, not wanting to alert anyone to my disobedience. The samples from the manta's hull sat waiting in sealed containers, thick, yellowish mucus that had once coated the interior of a living fossil. I pulled on latex gloves and got to work. The chromatography machine hummed softly as I prepared the first sample. While waiting for results, I connected my helmet cam's memory chip to the main computer, downloading the footage from inside the Leedsichthys. The chemical analysis beeped. I leaned forward, staring at the results, scrolling across the screen, then ran the test again to be sure. "What are you hiding?" I murmured to the sample. The protein structures didn't match anything in our database, not surprising for mucus from a creature believed extinct for 150 million years, but the complexity was astounding. The compounds contained molecular structures I'd never seen before, chains that resembled bioactive components, but arranged in patterns that defied conventional biochemistry. I spent the next 4 hours running different tests, documenting every result, cross-referencing with known marine biochemicals. By 6 a.m., I had filled 3 digital notebooks with findings and sketched preliminary structural diagrams of the novel compounds. The plankton samples from the bloom showed equally fascinating properties. Under the microscope, their cellular structures revealed specialized adaptation for nutrient density. I pulled up footage of the lead zichthys feeding, watching its massive mouth straining the water. The connection hit me. The plankton wasn't just food. It was specialized food, uniquely suited to the nutritional needs of this creature. My tablet chimed with a calendar reminder. Breakfast meeting at 7:30. I rubbed my eyes, feeling the burn of an all-nighter, but too excited to care. I took a quick break to change my shirt and splash cold water on my face. No time for another shower. Science waited for no one. By 7:25, I'd assembled my notes and findings into a presentable format and transferred everything to my tablet. I grabbed the sample container with the most interesting mucus specimen and headed for the mess hall. Everyone was already there when I walked in. Vicky spotted me first, her eyes narrowing at my obviously unrested appearance. "You were supposed to be sleeping," she said as I slid into the empty seat beside her. "Couldn't," I replied, setting my tablet on the table. The mess hall smelled of coffee and toast, with plates of eggs and fruit scattered among the research team. Too many questions keeping me awake. Braden handed me a mug of coffee without asking. "Your blood work came back normal, but you should still be resting. Physical trauma doesn't always show up immediately." "I appreciate the concern, but this couldn't wait." I took a sip of coffee, feeling the caffeine hit my system like a rescue line. The samples from the manta's hull, they're revolutionary. Sarah passed me a plate of toast. "Eat something first. Science can wait 5 minutes." I took a piece, but didn't eat it, too eager to share what I'd found. The mucus contains protein structures unlike anything documented in marine biology. I've run comparisons against every known fish species in our database. Crystal leaned forward, her breakfast forgotten. "Taxonomically unique." "Completely." I pulled up the molecular diagrams on my tablet and turned it so everyone could see. "These compound chains shouldn't exist according to what we know about fish evolution. They're not just different. They're impossible." John grabbed the tablet, scrolling through my results. "You did all this overnight?" Tu nodded, brushing crumbs from my fingers. "Sleep is overrated when you're looking at evolutionary biology's equivalent of finding a dinosaur in your backyard." Vicky took the tablet from John, her expression a mix of professional interest and personal concern. "These protein structures could explain the lack of predation we observed. The chemical composition might act as a natural deterrent." "Exactly," I said, finally taking a bite of toast to appease Sarah's watchful gaze. "But that's just the beginning. Look at the plankton samples from the bloom." I swiped to the next screen, showing microscope images of the plankton we'd collected. The tiny organisms looked unremarkable at first glance, but my night of research had revealed their secrets. The plankton in that specific bloom has unusual nutrient density, far higher than typical marine microorganisms. Its cellular structure allows for maximum nutrient absorption by filter feeders. I tapped the screen, highlighting certain cells. These aren't random plankton. They're specifically adapted to nourish the lead zichthys. Crystal moved to stand behind me, studying the images over my shoulder. "A symbiotic relationship? The plankton gets protection within the bloom, and the lead Zichthys gets an optimized food source. It would explain how a creature that size survives in modern oceans without being detected, Marilyn added. If it stays primarily in deep water trenches and only surfaces when these specialized blooms appear. I finished my coffee in one gulp, which brings me to the next thing I wanted to discuss. I pulled up a new file on my tablet, technical schematics of the Manta. The suit sustained damage, but the core systems are intact. With some modifications, we could convert it into a specialized research submersible specifically designed to study the lead Zichthys. Sarah put down her fork with an audible clink. Miles, you were almost digested yesterday. The hull integrity was compromised, and we haven't even completed a full diagnostic yet. I've already run preliminary diagnostics, I countered. The damage is primarily external, the sensor array, some of the hull plating. The internal systems are functional. With targeted modifications, we could reinforce the weak points and add specialized equipment for biological sampling. What kind of timeline are you suggesting? Vicky asked, her tone neutral, but her eyes skeptical. I took a deep breath. 24 hours for the initial modifications. We'd need to strip down some of the systems, reconfigure the propulsion array for better maneuverability, and install new sampling equipment. Sarah laughed without humor. That's impossible. The safety protocols alone would take days to recalibrate. Not if we work in parallel teams, I insisted. John can handle the navigation systems, Marilyn the programming, and I can oversee the physical modifications. Dr. Gilbert, who had been quietly listening while finishing her breakfast, finally spoke up. I think we should hear him out. This discovery is potentially the most significant marine biology find in a century. We have an obligation to document it thoroughly while we have the chance. I shot her a grateful look, then pulled up another file on my tablet. I've also sketched designs for a smaller observation drone that could launch from the modified Manta. The schematic showed a sleek, torpedo-shaped device about the size of my arm. It would be tethered to the main vessel, but could navigate more easily around the creature without posing a threat or risking being ingested. John studied the design with professional interest. The hydrodynamics look solid. We have components and storage that could work for this. The drone would need clear operational parameters, Marilyn said, already thinking through the programming challenges. I'd recommend setting hard boundaries to maintain distance from the creature's feeding zone. We don't want a repeat of yesterday. Agreed, I said. Safety is a priority. That's why the drone makes sense. Minimal risk with maximum data collection potential. John checked his own tablet, frowning slightly. There's another factor to consider. I've been monitoring satellite imaging of the surface waters. The plankton bloom is shifting with the currents, moving southeast at about 2 knots. If we want to continue studying this creature in its feeding environment, our window may be limited. The table fell silent as everyone considered the implications. The lead Zichthys would follow its food source. If the bloom dispersed or moved too far, we might lose our chance to study this living fossil. How long do we have? Vicky asked. John shrugged. Hard to say with certainty. Based on current patterns, maybe 72 hours before the bloom disperses beyond our research zone, less if weather conditions change. I looked around the table, meeting each person's eyes. This is why we need to move quickly. I'm not asking for permission to dive again immediately. I'm asking for 24 hours to implement basic modifications, so we're ready when conditions are optimal. Vicky tapped her fingers on the table, thinking. And what specific data would this modified dive collect that we don't already have? Tissue samples, for one, I said. Right now, we only have mucus. With the right equipment, we could obtain blood samples, external tissue scrapings, all without harming the specimen. We could also map its movement patterns in relation to the bloom, document its feeding techniques in greater detail, and search for evidence of other individuals. Other individuals? Sarah asked. I nodded. A single specimen surviving 150 million years past extinction is statistically impossible. There must be a population, however small. The argument continued through the remainder of breakfast, with concerns raised and addressed one by one. Sarah remained skeptical about the timeline, Crystal enthusiastic about the research potential, John pragmatic about the technical requirements. Through it all, Vicky listened, asking pointed questions, but not tipping her hand. Finally, as the dishes were being cleared, she made her decision. You have 24 hours for basic modifications, she said, holding up her hand when I started to smile. Basic modifications only. I want detailed plans on my desk in 2 hours, including safety protocols and contingency measures. No corners cut on hull integrity or life support. The drone idea is approved in concept, but I want testing in controlled conditions before deployment. Absolutely, I agreed, already mentally prioritizing the work ahead. I'll have those plans to you right away. And Miles, she added, her voice softening slightly. Get some sleep tonight. I need you sharp for this to work. I will, I promised, though we both knew my mind was already racing ahead to the modifications, the research potential, the living impossibility waiting beneath the waves. As the team dispersed to their morning duties, I stayed behind to finish sketching component designs on my tablet. The exhaustion of the all-nighter was fading under the rush of scientific adrenaline. 24 hours wasn't much time, but it would be enough to transform the Manta into something new, a window into a world we thought lost to time. After 20 minutes of uninterrupted work, I grabbed my coffee and headed for the engineering bay. The hallways of the Horizon were quiet this early in the morning. Most of the crew were still asleep, but I knew Marilyn would already be at work. She never missed a chance to tinker with the equipment. The engineering bay doors slid open, revealing Marilyn hunched over a workbench, surrounded by components from the Manta's damaged exterior. You couldn't sleep either? I asked, stepping inside. She looked up and brushed a strand of hair from her face. Someone had to start assessing the damage before you tried convincing everyone to send you back down there. I placed my tablet on the bench. Got the preliminary designs right here. Marilyn studied my sketches, zooming in on various components. This is ambitious for a 24-hour time frame. That's why I brought coffee. We worked through the early hours without pause, dismantling the damaged sections of the Manta and repurposing what we could. 2 engineers joined us around 4 in the morning, bleary-eyed but eager to help with what Marilyn had described as the coolest rush job in marine biology history. The Manta's hull needed reinforcement at key stress points where the lead Ichthys had put the most pressure. I installed ceramic composite plates that would distribute pressure more evenly across the structure. Marilyn focused on upgrading the sensor array, calibrating it specifically to detect large organism movement patterns, even through dense plankton blooms. The old system was designed to filter out large signals to better detect microorganisms, she explained, hands deep in wiring. We're doing the opposite now. By sunrise, sweat dripped from my forehead as I connected the last power coupling to the new drone system. We'd nicknamed it Remora, after the fish that attached to sharks, small enough to get close to our living fossil, without triggering a defensive response, but equipped with high-definition cameras and sampling tools. How's it looking? Crystal asked, appearing at the doorway with a tray of sandwiches. I wiped my hands on a rag. We're making progress. Communication system is next. You've been at it all night? She set down the food. The plankton bloom won't wait for us to catch up on sleep. I picked up a sandwich and took a bite, suddenly aware of how hungry I was. Crystal studied the modified Manta. So this small pod detaches? That's the remora, I explained between bites. It'll give us close-up footage without risking the main vessel. After what happened yesterday, I'd rather not become fish food again. The next few hours blurred together as we connected systems, ran diagnostics, and patched the damaged hull. By 10 a.m., the Manta looked different, bulkier in places where we'd added reinforcement, with the small remora drone attached to its underside. "Time to test the comms," I said, climbing into the cockpit. Sarah arrived as I was adjusting the headset. She carried a clipboard and wore the expression of someone who'd come to deliver bad news. "The safety protocols for this dive are non-negotiable," she said, handing me the clipboard. I scanned the document while Marilyn ran final system checks. The parameters were strict. Maximum depth of 600 meters, mandatory hourly check-ins, and immediate ascent if hull integrity dropped below 90%. "Only 4 hours of bottom time?" I asked, looking up at Sarah. "That's generous considering what happened yesterday." She crossed her arms. "Vicky wanted to limit you to 2. "Sarah, come in." I spoke into the headset, testing the communication system. Her voice came through crystal clear in my ear. "Receiving you." "All systems are green," Marilyn called from her station. "Remora drone is responding to controls." I signed Sarah's safety parameters and handed back the clipboard. "We're ready to go." "Just because we can send you back down there doesn't mean we should," Sarah said, her voice softening. "But the data you brought back, it's too important to ignore." An hour later, I was suited up and in the Manta, being lowered into the water. The team had gathered on deck, Vicky giving last-minute instructions, John reviewing sonar data, and Marilyn making adjustments to my communication system. "Remember, the bloom has shifted since yesterday." John's voice came through my headset as the Manta touched the water. "Head southeast at a bearing of 153. Copy that." I engaged the thrusters once the crane released the Manta. Water closed over the viewport, and I began my descent. The enhanced displays showed depth, water temperature, and oxygen levels. A new addition was the long-range biomass detector that would alert me to the lead ichthys long before visual contact. At 300 meters, I reached the upper boundary of the plankton bloom. It was noticeably less dense than yesterday, patches of clear water visible between cloudy sections. "I'm entering the bloom," I reported. "Visibility is better than yesterday, but the concentration is decreasing. We might be losing our window of opportunity." "Understood," Vicky replied. "Proceed with caution." I continued downward, watching the sensor array for any signs of large organism movement. At 450 meters, the first alert pinged, a massive biomass reading approximately 200 meters ahead. "I've got something on the new sensors," I reported, adjusting my course slightly. "Can't see it yet, but the readings match what we'd expect from our friend." "Keep your distance," Sarah reminded me. "That's why we built the remora." I slowed the Manta's descent and leveled out at 500 meters. The plankton was thick enough here that visibility extended only about 15 meters in any direction, but the sensors told me everything I needed to know. The lead ichthys was ahead, moving slowly through the bloom. At 520 meters, I caught my first glimpse. A dark shape moved through the cloudy water, enormous and graceful despite its size. I positioned the Manta at the agreed safety distance of 50 meters and prepared the remora for deployment. "Visual confirmation," I said, unable to keep the excitement from my voice. Preparing to launch remora. The small drone detached from the Manta with a soft click. I gripped the separate control stick and guided it toward the lead ichthys, keeping my movements slow and non-threatening. On my screen, the feed from the remora's cameras showed the massive creature in stunning detail. Its skin had a mottled pattern, darkest along the spine and fading to a pale cream on its underside. The enormous mouth opened and closed rhythmically, taking in huge volumes of plankton-rich water. "Are you seeing this?" I asked, knowing the team was receiving the same video feed. "Incredible." Crystal's voice was barely audible. "The gill structures are exactly as predicted from fossil records, but there's more vascularization than we thought." I guided the remora around the creature's head, capturing footage of its gill function. Water poured from the gill slits in powerful streams, filtered clean of plankton. "I'm recording extraordinary feeding efficiency," I narrated for the log. "The mouth opening creates a pressure differential that draws plankton in, and the gill rakers act as sieves. But there's something else happening. The mucus on the gill rakers appears to be capturing nutrients that would normally pass through." For nearly an hour, I maneuvered the remora around the Leedsichthys, documenting every aspect of its anatomy and behavior. We observed how it changed direction, how its massive tail propelled it through the water with minimal effort, and how it seemed to sense the densest patches of plankton. "The estimated length is consistent with our largest fossil specimens," I reported. "Just under 30 meters, but the body mass appears greater than predicted, possibly an adaptation to colder modern oceans." The remora's sensors collected data on water composition around the creature, confirming our earlier findings about the unique microenvironment it created. "This is beyond anything we could have hoped for," John said. "We're witnessing behaviors that would never fossilize." I was so focused on the remora's footage that I almost missed the alert from the manta's sensors. The Leedsichthys had changed course. It was turning toward me. "Movement alert," I said, checking the distance readings. "It's heading in my direction." "Distance?" Vicky's voice was calm but urgent. 40 meters and closing. I'm recalling the remora now." I guided the drone back toward the manta as quickly as I dared without making erratic movements that might trigger a predatory response. The Leedsichthys continued its turn, its massive head now pointing directly at my position. 30 meters, I updated. Still approaching. The remora was almost back. Just a few more seconds and it would dock with the manta. The Leedsichthys kept coming, its enormous mouth beginning to open. 25 meters, I reported. "Remora is almost docked." I heard Sarah's voice, tight with concern. "Prepare for emergency ascent." The remora clicked into place just as the proximity alarm sounded. 20 meters. The creature filled my viewport now, blotting out the ambient light as it approached. I disengaged the safety locks and grabbed the ascent controls, ready to rocket toward the surface the moment the Leedsichthys came too close. Then something unexpected happened. It slowed down. "It's changing its approach pattern," I told the team. "Not the same behavior as yesterday." The massive fish reduced its speed, shifting from a direct course to a more gradual arc that brought it alongside the manta rather than straight at me. I checked my depth gauge. 498 meters. "Miles, you need to start your ascent now," Vicky said, her voice tight with concern. I studied the creature's movement pattern. Yesterday, it had been purely focused on feeding, sucking in everything in its path. This was different, more deliberate. "Hold on," I said, still watching. "It's not trying to feed, it's checking us out." 20 meters away, the Leedsichthys drifted in a wide, lazy circle around the manta. Its enormous body blocked much of the ambient light, creating a moving shadow across my viewport. I kept my hand on the ascent control but didn't engage it. "What's it doing?" John asked through the comm. "Circling me," I replied, turning the manta slowly to keep the creature in view. "Almost like it's curious." Crystal's voice came through next. "Interesting." Filter feeders typically don't investigate objects in their environment unless they're potential food sources. I adjusted the external cameras to track the lead Zichthys as it continued its circuit around me. The creature was moving with surprising grace for something so huge, its massive tail propelling it through the water with minimal effort. "Miles," Sarah said firmly, "protocol says you need to ascend if a large marine animal approaches within 20 meters. I knew she was right, but this was an opportunity we might never get again. Just a few more minutes. It's not displaying any aggression." The lead Zichthys completed its first circuit and began a second, slightly tighter loop. I counted the seconds between its passes in front of my viewport. The creature was maintaining a consistent distance and speed. "The team has been analyzing your footage from yesterday," Marilyn said. "We've never seen behavioral patterns like this in modern filter feeders." "Because there aren't any modern filter feeders this size," I replied. "Nothing even close." The enormous fish adjusted its course again, moving closer. 15 meters now. I tensed but kept watching. Its movements remained smooth, unhurried. "Miles, I'm ordering you to begin ascent," Vicky said. I could tell from her tone she meant business. "Wait," I said. "It's coming closer. I think it's trying to get a better look at us." The lead Zichthys changed direction, swimming directly toward the manta. My heart beat faster. I placed my thumb on the ascent button, ready to punch it if needed. But then the creature slowed and drifted to a stop about 10 meters away. That's when I saw it. The eye. Positioned on the side of its massive head, it rotated slightly to focus on the manta. It was huge, easily the size of a dinner plate, dark and surprisingly clear. Ancient. Intelligent. "I can see its eye," I said quietly, almost whispering, though there was no need. "It's watching me." "It's probably never encountered anything like the manta before," Crystal suggested. "You're a novelty in its environment." The eye blinked, a slow, deliberate motion that sent a chill through me. This was a moment of contact across an impossible gap of evolutionary time, a living fossil examining a modern human in his technological shell. "Miles, your oxygen levels are fine, but your heart rate is elevated," Braden reported. "Try to stay calm." "I'm calm," I replied, though I wasn't sure that was true. Just amazed. The creature continued to hover, its massive form suspended in the water before me. Its gill structures pulsed rhythmically, drawing water through its complex filtration system, even as it remained stationary. "We're getting clear readings of its bioelectrical field," John reported. "Nothing like this in our database." An idea struck me. I glanced at the control panel where I'd reconfigured the acoustic array yesterday. That had been at maximum intensity, designed to trigger a defensive response. But what if? "I'm going to try something," I said. "The acoustic array might let us communicate with it, or at least see how it responds to different sounds." "Miles," Vicky started to object. "Low frequencies only," I assured her. "Nothing that would stress or harm it. Just making contact." I adjusted the controls, setting the array to emit a low, gentle hum, well below the painful frequencies I'd used to escape yesterday. The sound was barely audible to human ears, but in water, it would carry clearly. The effect was immediate. The lead Zichthys twitched, its massive body tensing momentarily. The great eye widened slightly. "It heard that," I reported. "Definite response." I adjusted the frequency slightly, raising it by a few hertz. The creature moved back slightly, then forward again, cautious but interested. "Are you getting this?" I asked, making sure the cameras were capturing everything. "Every second," Marilyn confirmed. "This is unprecedented data, Miles." I tried a different pattern, 2 short pulses followed by a longer one. The lead Zichthys responded by swimming in a tight circle, then returning to its position in front of the manta. "It's communicating," Crystal said, her voice filled with wonder, or at least responding to the patterns. "Modern whales and dolphins do this," I said, "but we've never had evidence of this kind of behavior in prehistoric fish species." The lead Zichthys moved closer, now barely 5 meters from the manta. I could see details of its skin, the texture, the pattern of scales, even small parasites attached to its massive form. "Miles, that's too close," Sarah warned. I didn't respond. I was too focused on what was happening. I sent another series of tones through the water, this time a rising pattern. What happened next left me speechless. The massive creature, 30 meters of prehistoric fish, performed a complete roll, rotating its enormous body 360 degrees in the water. The maneuver was slow and deliberate, displaying its pale belly before completing the rotation. "Did you see that?" I finally managed to say. It just rolled." "We saw it," Vicky replied, her voice hushed. "No filter-feeding fish has ever been documented performing that kind of maneuver. It's behaviorally complex. The energy expenditure for a creature that size to perform that movement is enormous," Crystal added. "It's not just responding to you, Miles. It's showing off." I adjusted the camera angles again, making sure we captured every detail. This was evolutionary biology being rewritten in real time. "This changes everything we know about prehistoric marine cognitive capacity," I said. "These aren't just simple filter feeders. They're complex, intelligent creatures." I tried several more sound patterns, and each time the lead Zichthys responded with different movements, changes in direction, speed, or position. It was clearly capable of distinguishing between the patterns and responding uniquely to each. "We're recording all of this, right?" I asked. "Every second," John confirmed. "The data will take weeks to analyze fully." After nearly 20 minutes of this extraordinary interaction, I noticed a change in the creature's behavior. It seemed less focused on the manta, its eye occasionally drifting away to scan the surrounding water. "I think it's losing interest," I reported. As if confirming my observation, the lead Zichthys began to turn away, its massive body pivoting slowly in the water. It paused once more, that dinner plate eye giving the manta a final look, then moved off toward the plankton bloom we'd observed earlier. "It's returning to feeding," I said, watching as the creature opened its enormous mouth and began to swim steadily through a cloud of microscopic organisms. I felt a strange mix of relief and disappointment as the lead Zichthys moved away. Part of me wanted to follow it, to spend days or weeks studying its every movement. But I knew we had already gathered more data than we could have hoped for. "Beginning ascent," I finally said, engaging the thrusters to start the manta's journey back to the surface. "Glad to hear it," Vicky replied, not bothering to hide her relief. As the manta rose through the water column, I kept the rear cameras focused on the diminishing form of the lead Zichthys. Even from a distance, its size was apparent, a living relic from an age we'd previously only known through fossils. "How much did we record?" I asked. 27 minutes of high-definition video, Marilyn reported. "Plus all the sensor data, acoustic responses, movement patterns, bioelectrical readings." "That's going to make quite a paper," I said, smiling despite my exhaustion. "Papers," Crystal corrected. "Plural. This is enough data for years of research." I watched the depth gauge as the numbers decreased. 450 meters, 400, 350. Each meter taking me farther from the most extraordinary encounter of my scientific career. "We just rewrote the textbooks on prehistoric marine species," I said. Nobody's going to look at those fossils the same way again. The realization of what we'd accomplished began to sink in. We hadn't just discovered a living specimen of a creature thought extinct for 150 million years. We documented behaviors never before known, complex responses, possible communication, intelligence that no one had ever suspected in a fish of that evolutionary age. The scientific community is going to go wild when they see this footage, Sarah said. I nodded, though no one could see me. Not just the footage, the implications. If the lead Zichthys survived, what else might still be out there in the deep ocean? As the manta continued its ascent, I felt a profound sense of privilege. For a brief window of time, I had made contact with a living fossil, a creature that by all rights shouldn't exist in our modern world. And it had responded, not as a mindless feeding machine, but as a complex, curious being. We'd come looking for data and found something much more valuable, a new understanding of life itself and the incredible tenacity with which it clings to existence, even across the vast gulfs of evolutionary time.